Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to our weekly live stream. Dimitri, I think we decided to go back to our regular schedule that we used to have back in the summer, I think, right? Where every Sunday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, we'll try to go live. Folks, make sure to like, subscribe, share this live stream so that as many people could join us. I'm currently still in Colombia, but with high hopes of being in Cuba soon to document the total fuel embargo and the engineered humanitarian crisis created by the Americans, the United States. So, Dimitri, where are you? Where are you?
I'm in Montreal, and welcome everybody. I see that we have comrades here from Palestine, Aniyatai, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. We have Adastra Recordings from Alberta, who's had some interesting comments about Alberta in the chat. How you doing? And we have Regina Ann D from Regina, Saskatchewan. Welcome. Just let me point out that immediately before this live stream began, my son pointed out to me the last time we did this, you can only see half my face. Apparently there's an issue about this on Instagram. I don't think it's a problem on YouTube or X, but if you are having difficulty with the image, whether me or Rami, sorry about that. We're going to have to work that out. So it is February 15th. To those who celebrate Valentine's Day, a belated happy Valentine's Day to you all. And hello, Colleen Larry. And we have Namaistern from Oakland and Rajan Hild from Norway. Pleasure to see you all from so many different and disparate parts of the world. So today we're going to talk about two subjects. We were originally intending to devote this live stream to our latest research on the Epstein files. But yesterday, the dastardly powers of Europe came out with their latest PSYOP. At least that's our interpretation of events. And before we get into that, let me say that Rami's feeling a little bit under the weather today. And like a true comrade, he's here nonetheless. He's going to do his best, not in ideal health conditions. Rami, what are you going to be talking about today?
So a couple of things. So the first thing I'll be talking about will be the humanitarian situation in Cuba, and the silence from Western media really related to this subject. We're witnessing probably the strongest embargo in the world in history after Gaza. Currently, all Canadian airplanes, all Russian airplanes stopped all their flights to Cuba. There's talks that last week there was 2 weeks of worth of fuel left into the country. Now we're down to 1 week. That will mean that hospitals will probably have to shut down, factories will shut down, the production of food will probably slow down, and the ability to transport food across the country. So truly tragic situation going on in Cuba. And we need to remember that this is a United States engineered humanitarian situation in Cuba. And then I'll show a lot of images and documents that I found while doing my research on Daniel Siad, I like to call him the number 2 in the Epstein operations. But those are documents that I had found that were not too related to Daniel Siad, but I thought would be quite important to share with you guys, and also talk about the other people that I'll be investigating related to the Epstein files.
And just related to Rami's upcoming trip to Cuba, we know, or at least it's been reported, that Mexico is sending humanitarian supplies to Cuba, although it appears to have suspended oil shipments. And 3 days ago, the Russian embassy in Cuba reported to the Russian media that it was going to be sending oil to Cuba as well. Now, we know from the events of the last few weeks that the Trump regime is willing to seize on the high seas and international waters Russian flagged vessels that are carrying oil which the Trump regime considers to be an illicit ship. They seized such a vessel in the North Atlantic. So if, in fact, Russia carries through with this commitment to supply oil to Cuba, any number of scenarios might unfold, one of which is that the Russians decide to send a military escort with the oil, with the cargo ship, and then who knows what's going to happen. Or they might send it undefended, and the Trump regime is going to have to make a decision whether it's willing to interdict Russian oil shipments to Cuba by force. It's a very dangerous situation, first and foremost, for the Cuban people. Obviously, they are the ones who are suffering by far the most in this latest act of piracy and international roguery by the Trump regime. But this could become a conflict of international proportions, global proportions, if this continues. So in any case, with that as introduction, let me jump into the topic of yesterday's announcement by 5 European states that they had made a shocking discovery related to the death of Alexei Navalny. So on the second day of the 3-day Munich Security Conference, which was yesterday, the governments of the UK, Germany, France, Sweden, and the Netherlands issued a joint statement on the death of Alexei Navalny. And that statement, which we'll look at more closely, claims that Navalny was killed by a poison found in dart frogs. The Western corporate media instantly trumpeted this statement without a hint of skepticism. I learned of it myself from a Toronto Star news alert, which was deposited in my email inbox minutes after the statement by these governments came out. So before we take a critical look at the joint statement from 5 European governments about Navalny's death, I'd like to revisit the question of who Alexei Navalny was. Navalny was a Russian lawyer whom the West described as an anti-corruption crusader, an opposition leader, and the most formidable Russian critic of Vladimir Putin. And you can see here just a tiny example of the Western narrative about Navalny. This is from the Journal of Democracy, the headline being "The Man Who Stood Up to Vladimir Putin." In a 2011 interview, Navalny described Russia's ruling party, United Russia, as a party of crooks and thieves. He ran to be the mayor of Moscow in 2013. He garnered 27% of the vote. And the winner, Sergei Sobyanin, received 51% of the vote in that election in the first round and therefore avoided a runoff. So it wasn't really a close vote, but Navalny did, at least in Moscow, garner a significant percentage of the popular vote. Now, in 2013 and 14, Navalny was convicted of embezzlement by a Russian court. In each case, he received a suspended sentence. I'm not in a position to comment on the validity of the conviction. For me to do that, I have to have some understanding of the relevant laws of Russia and would have to have reviewed in some detail the evidentiary record and the court's reasons. And I've not been able to do any of those things. And frankly, I doubt that anybody in the Western media has done the kind of exercise that would be necessary to decide whether there was a rational basis to the conviction. So I'm not here to tell you that he did in fact commit embezzlement or he didn't. All I know is a Russian court convicted of embezzlement twice in 2013, 2014, and gave him a suspended sentence. Now, in 2018, Navalny wanted to run apparently in Russia's presidential election in that year, but the Electoral Commission ruled that Navalny was ineligible, and the reason was because of his criminal convictions. In August 2020, Navalny was hospitalized in Berlin due to an apparent poisoning. He and Western governments claimed that Navalny had been poisoned with a nerve agent called Novichok, and that Vladimir Putin had ordered him to be poisoned. By the way, a frequent guest in our show, John Helmer, who's an expert in Russian affairs, has written a book about Novichok, not specifically in relation to Navalny, but in relation to 2 other opponents of the Russian government who were alleged to have been poisoned by Novichok. And according to John and his book, which is quite a read, the claim that those two particular opponents of the Russian government were poisoned by Novichok is a scam. That's not his word, I guess. That's my word. I'm paraphrasing, but you should have a look at that book if you're interested in this subject. In any case, in January 2021, Navalny returned to Russia and was immediately detained on accusations of violating his parole conditions while he was in Germany. And the next month, Navalny's suspended sentence was replaced with a prison sentence of 2.5 years detention. In March 2022, Navalny was sentenced to an additional 9 years in prison after being found guilty of embezzlement and contempt of court in a new trial. And in August 2023, he received another sentence of 19 years on extremism charges. Again, I'm not in a position to evaluate any of those convictions to offer an opinion, just because I'm not steeped in the relevant laws of Russia, nor have I been able to review the evidentiary record, the transcripts, and so forth. I don't speak Russian. I don't have the ability to do that without engaging in an extensive translation exercise. So I'm not going to offer to you an opinion about whether those convictions were valid or invalid. I don't assume that they were valid. I don't assume that they were invalid either. I'm just reporting the fact that they happened. Now, in February 2024, the Russian government announced that Navalny had died in prison. And Western governments immediately accused Vladimir Putin of having ordered his death, a charge which the Russian government strenuously denied. Now, interestingly, at the time after Navalny died, the head of Ukrainian military intelligence, Kirilo Budanov, contradicted the claim of Western governments. And here you can see an article from 25th February 2024 from Ukrainska Pravda, a pro-Ukraine and I think it's fair to say anti-Russia media outlet in Ukraine, entitled "Ukraine's Defense Intelligence Chief Claims Navalny Died of Natural Causes." So Budanov presumably knows a thing or two about what's going on in Russia. He is, after all, certainly at that time, he was the head of Ukraine's defense intelligence, stated that Russian opposition politician Alexei Navalny died of natural causes, specifically a blood clot. And he was quoted as saying, "I may disappoint you, but we know he died from a blood clot. It's more or less confirmed. This is not taken from the internet, but unfortunately, a natural death." So for what that's worth, he certainly wasn't buying into the narrative at that time that the Russian government had murdered Alexei Navalny. And you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who is more hostile to Vladimir Putin than Budanov. In fact, the intelligence service he runs has attempted to kill the Russian president, at least on one occasion, if not more. Western governments and media do not like to acknowledge the fact that Navalny was an extreme nationalist and a bigot. In 2021, Amnesty International stripped Navalny of the title Prisoner of Conscience due to evidence that Navalny had engaged in hate speech, including a notorious video in which Navalny compared immigrants to cockroaches. And here you can see a report from the BBC from February 2021. And as it reports, Amnesty International has stripped the Russian opposition politician Alexei Navalny of his prisoner of conscience status after it says it was bombarded with complaints highlighting xenophobic comments that he has made in the past and not renounced. So that was as late as 2021. He had not renounced these comments. In addition, Navalny's wife, Yulia Navalnaya, appears to have a very cozy relationship with Western governments. In February 2024, Navalnaya met with Joe Biden at a time when the Biden administration was waging a proxy war against Russia. And there you can see her, Navalny's widow, embracing the psycho zombie Joe Biden at the time that he was president. Now, in February 2024, after Navalny died, Navalny, his widow, made an unscheduled appearance at the Munich Security Conference, where she received a standing ovation and called on Vladimir Putin to be held accountable for her husband's death. Now, let's turn to the statement issued yesterday by the 5 governments that I mentioned, the governments of the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and the Netherlands and Sweden. Let me just find it here. So, one moment. Here we go. It's still uploading. Sorry for the delay, folks. You're going to see that this statement lays out the purported basis of the claim that Navalny was killed with a dart frog poison. Unfortunately, this has taken a little longer than I had hoped to upload. In any case, I'll describe to you what it says in the hope that we can get the thing uploaded before everybody loses patience. Basically, what the thing says is that the 5 governments obtained samples taken from Navalny's corpse and determined that through laboratory tests that Navalny had been poisoned by a substance that is found in dart frogs. And unfortunately, I don't know, Rami, if there's a way that you can enlarge that image that I've got up there on the screen. It's a bit difficult, probably impossible for people to read. But the key things to understand about this statement are the following. First of all, the 5 governments in question do not identify who conducted the laboratory tests. We don't know whether they're independent of the governments. We don't know what their expertise is. We don't know their names. We don't know what company they come from, whether they're employees of any Western intelligence agency. The second thing is we don't know from this statement, there's no indication how they managed to obtain samples, as they put it, from Navalny's corpse. Navalny was in a polar detention camp up in the far north of Russia at the time that he died. His body was in the custody of Russian authorities because he was in prison. So there's no indication as to how they obtained samples from his body. And there's no proof whatsoever offered in this statement, or as far as I can see anywhere in any context, that the samples that these laboratory technicians actually examined were, in fact, from Navalny's corpse. And thirdly, there is a lot of emphasis in this statement about the chemical weapons aspect of their allegation. They say as follows: Russia's repeated disregard for international law and the Chemical Weapons Convention is clear. These latest findings once again underline the need to hold Russia accountable for its repeated violations of Chemical Weapons Convention and, in this instance, the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention. So it's quite clear that these 5 governments are trying to elevate the death of this one individual, however he may have died, into an allegation that Russia is violating chemical weapons, international treaties relating to chemical weapons, which would obviously make this a much more egregious crime, were it in fact to have been committed by the Russian Federation, than simply the extrajudicial killing of a single individual. Now, there are so many problems with this statement that it's really hard to know where to begin. First of all, as I indicated, where are the lab tests? Have they been published? They're not part of this statement. I have not seen any report. I've checked the Western media. including the outlets like The Guardian, for example, The Telegraph, that are promoting this narrative as aggressively as possible. I've not seen any indication that the lab tests have been published. I've not seen any indication as to who the persons were who conducted the lab tests and whether they were affiliated with any of these governments or they were independent experts. I've not seen any explanation of how they obtained or purportedly obtained samples from the body of Navalny after he died, despite the fact that his body was in the custody of Russian law enforcement authorities. I've not seen any proof that what they examined were, in fact, samples taken from the body of Alexei Navalny. Basically, therefore, we are simply being asked to have faith in these the intelligence agencies of these 5 European countries, because there's absolutely no objective, credible evidence to back up anything that they're saying. This is simply unsubstantiated assertion by the governments of the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Sweden, and the Netherlands. Now, I would think that the obvious question here is, why the hell would anyone trust these people? One could go on and on for hours recounting the lies of Western intelligence agencies and these governments in particular when it comes to crimes alleged to have been committed by official enemies of the West. I'll just mention one in passing, and that is, we were told for 4 years or more that the reason why that Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton in 2016 was because Russia hacked the 2016 election and engaged in gross interference in U.S. politics. And after the U.S. government spent millions of dollars and hired former FBI Director Robert Mueller to conduct an exhaustive investigation, he came up with no credible evidence at all that, in fact, the victory of Donald Trump was due to Russian hacking or Russian electoral interference. And in fact, much of that claim was based upon a character named Christopher Steele, a Brit who was working with British intelligence, or an agent of British intelligence. And the so-called Steele dossier was ultimately demonstrated to be a pack of implausible lies. So that's just one instance. I could name many more. For example, I could point out, and will point out, that all 5 of these governments and their respective intelligence agencies are providing full-throated support to Israel right now, as Israel is carrying out a genocide right now. So these agencies and the governments who rely upon their intelligence work have demonstrated that they have an absolute contempt for international law and basic human rights, and that they're willing to lie shamelessly in order to justify their support for an ongoing genocide. So I would humbly suggest to you all that anyone who believes these people and is willing to make a leap of faith when they make claims of this nature against an official enemy of the West without any credible objective evidence to back them up, that you're naive at best and that you're a damn fool at worst. So I myself refuse to take their word for it unless and until I see objective evidence, credible objective evidence to back it up. I'm simply not going to attach any significant weight to these allegations, and I suggest you do likewise. And by the way, since we're on this subject of credibility, as I mentioned, they're making a big deal in their joint statement, these 5 European governments, about chemical weapons. And yet none of them seems to be particularly concerned about the fact that over the past several weeks, their close ally, Israel, has been spraying a toxic herbicide across the lands of South Lebanon, and also, I understand, in Syria. This herbicide is glyphosate, and this is believed by the World Health Organization to probably be carcinogenic. So I have not seen a single peep of criticism or condemnation out of any of these governments relating to the mass spraying of glyphosate on lands that are not even part of, the sovereign territory of Israel during the past few weeks. And yet we're to believe that they are deeply concerned about the implications for the use of chemical weapons resulting from the death of one individual in the custody of Russian law enforcement. And, quite apart from all of that, I would suggest to you that this story makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, 0 sense. So, according to the narrative being pushed by these 5 governments, they say that there are no dart frogs in Russia, which I think is correct. And they say, in addition, that you can't, these frogs don't generate this toxic substance in captivity. So basically, what this means is that in order for Russia to have obtained the poison, they would have had to send an agent to the part of the world, I think it's Africa or South America, where you can actually find these frogs in the wild, would have had to extract the poison from them and return it to Russia. And the question that I ask is, why would Russia go through all of those hoops when it could have employed any number of poisons that were readily available to the Russian government in Russia? Why would it do something so exotic and weird as to going to, Africa or South America to obtain this substance from frogs in the wild when it could have poisoned Navalny in any number of ways, from substances that were readily available to Russia, the Russian authorities in Russia. And furthermore, why wouldn't they simply concoct some Epstein-like fantasy? Oh, guess what? Alexei Navalny hung himself using a bed sheet, and it just so happened that at the time that he hung himself, the prison guards who were on watch fell asleep, and the security camera outside his cell failed. And so, we can't actually show you the video footage, and we can't tell you why, the security guards didn't stop this from happening. But he killed himself. They could have concocted a story like that. After all, the Trump regime did it, and the Western media and other Western governments are perfectly content to accept the Trump regime's explanation of how Jeffrey Epstein died. So why wouldn't Russia just pull a similar stunt? Instead, no, we're told they went off and they went to all this trouble to obtain this exotic poison. I mean, the whole thing, frankly, is laughable. And when I myself first saw this news alert, the first thing that I thought of was this guy. Yeah, Dr. Evil. That's exactly what this sounds like. Dr. Evil would send people to the deep, dark jungles of Africa or South America to extract some deadly poison from frogs and then bring it back to wherever he happens to be to kill one of his opponents. I'm not buying it, folks, and I suggest you dismiss it as another Western intelligence fantasy. So I strongly suspect, and by the way, you may be asking yourself, well, if this isn't fantasy, why would they use this? Why would they concoct this story to blame Russia for the death of Alexei Navalny? I can only speculate, but there are 2 reasons that immediately come to mind. First of all, if you frame the killing, assuming he was killed, Alexei Navalny, in this way, it makes the Russians look particularly devious. They're always coming up with clever, devious ways to kill their political opponents, and therefore they're a sinister threat to all that we hold dear. And another thing is, frankly, it just is sexier. It's the kind of thing that people are more likely to remember. It's the kind of thing the press is more likely to report. And so they come up with some kind of explanation or allegation that is fantastical and that is more likely to capture the public's attention. At the end of the day, again, I'm speculating as to why they would use this particular, fabrication in order to pin the finger, to point the finger at Russia. But at the end of the day, it really just doesn't make any damn sense. Now, I want to be very clear that I am not telling you that I know how Alexei Navalny died. I don't know. I think it's possible that the Russian government is telling the truth. I think it's possible that the Russian government is not telling the truth. I don't believe that this story is true. I think it's ridiculous, but it is, I admit, possible that someone in the Russian government, it may have been the president, it may have been somebody with less authority than the president, decided to eliminate Alexei Navalny for any number of reasons. For example, for the reason that he was clearly aligned with Western governments at a time that Western governments were waging a proxy war against Russia, or might have been a personal grudge, who knows. I'm not telling you that I know how he died. And I'm not certainly suggesting that I approve in any case of extrajudicial execution. I don't. I condemn it in all cases. And if that happened here, I would condemn it just as much as I would do in any other case. My point here simply is that there is no credible evidence to date offered by any Western government or by Navalny's widow that Navalny was killed by Russian authorities. And as I said earlier, even Kirill Budanov, the head of defense intelligence in Ukraine, said in February of 2024, shortly after Navalny died, that it was the conclusion of his agency that Navalny died of natural causes. Now, what I do know, I don't know how Alexei Navalny died and don't purport to know. I do know that Israel, with the full backing of all 5 of these governments, the UK, France, Germany, Sweden, and the Netherlands, have murdered tens of thousands of Palestinian children during the last 2+ years, and is continuing to commit genocide against the Palestinian people. That I do know. The evidence of that is monumental, unambiguous, and yet we are supposed to get worked up as a result of this unsubstantiated, fantastical claim from 5 Western governments against Russia about the killing of one man who was a nationalist bigot, and ignore the fact that these same 5 governments are enabling and defending an ongoing genocide. I refuse to do that, and I have no hesitation in saying that these 5 governments should be flushed down the toilet of history. Every single one of them, Starmer, Merz, Macron, and the rest of them. And I don't attach one damn a gram of importance to anything they have to say about the official enemies of the West, unless and until I see it substantiated by credible, compelling, independent evidence. That's my rant for today, Rami.
Absolutely. And I think what's the most...
I'm sorry, Rami. I just wanted to point out one other thing I forgot to mention. Shortly after Navalny died, the Levada Center in Russia, which is quite hostile to the government of Vladimir Putin, it's a polling agency, did a poll on how Russians felt about the death of Alexei Navalny. And you'll see here that they found that 3% of respondents expressed anger at the death of Alexei Navalny, 3% expressed shock, 17% expressed sympathy, and 69% professed to have had no emotional response in particular to the news that Alexei Navalny had died. What percentage of Western governments were angered and shocked by the death of Alexei Navalny? 100%. What percentage of Western corporate media outlets were outraged and shocked by the death of Alexei Navalny? 100%. But the Russian people themselves, according to this polling agency that is very critical of Vladimir Putin, were largely indifferent to the death of this man. So again, this is very important to say. Perceptions within these countries about these developments, invariably, there's just a dramatic disparity between those perceptions and what we're hearing from the Western media and from Western governments. And anybody, in my opinion, who aligns himself, comes from a non-Western country, and is not only critical of the government of that country, but aligns him or herself with the West, with Washington and with London and Paris and Berlin, these people have absolutely no credibility in my eyes. And I'll give you 2 current examples of this. Maria Corina Machado, who is who was given the Nobel Peace Prize, the Venezuelan opposition leader, she is clearly aligned not only with Washington and London, but also with Israel. So whatever legitimacy there may be to the criticisms of the Venezuelan government, the fact that she has aligned herself with those particular regimes, for me, destroys whatever credibility she may have had. And the other example I'll give you is the son of the Iranian Shah, Pahlavi, who is currently being held out by Western governments and by a number of Iranians living in the diaspora as the savior of Iran. Again, somebody who has aligned himself 100% with Washington and with Israel. From my perspective, whatever criticisms you could make against the Iranian government, Pahlavi has destroyed his credibility by virtue of the fact that he has aligned himself with these monsters in Washington and Tel Aviv. So that's all I have to say on this subject, Rami.
And the timing is quite specific, right? So there's this Munich security conference going on. Everyone's going wild with the Epstein leak, and the United States needs to remind the world that the enemy is Russia, and it comes with these bogus claims of frog dart poison, but it's not exclusive to just Russia. Radio Free Asia keeps spreading propaganda and lies through anonymous sources about the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, North Korea, such as these bogus claims that people could only have one haircut, the haircut of Kim Jong-un. Or even more silly is this claim that the Cuban government employed or built some laser guns that can produce headaches for American embassy staff, named the Havana syndrome. And this is just meant to demonize countries and, as you said, right, like remove the humanity from them and just turn them into a big image of the biggest form of evil, so that when it comes to us suffocating them with sanctions or building support for war, then it's a lot easier to do this. Because, I mean, and we talk to regular people, you know, in Canada, friends of friends, or friends in general. When we talk about Russia, it truly is the most absurd claims you'll ever hear about them, about Russia. And it comes through these bogus titles. But in slightly other news, again, as I mentioned, right, there's a total embargo on fuel to Cuba. Venezuela and Mexico used to be the two largest exporters of fuel to Cuba, and it's important to mention that the electricity grid in Cuba, it is generated through the combustion of fuel, and that's basically a deliberate attempt by the United States to starve the Cuban population. It's important to mention that heavy machinery meant for agriculture uses fuel to transport food across the country. It requires fuel. Hospitals live off of fuel through the combustion of, for the production of energy. That means that people on dialysis or incubated will not be able to access essential services if the fuel is cut off. And then it's also important to mention that Cuba's biggest source of foreign currency comes from tourism. And most of that tourism actually comes from Canada and Russia. And Canadian planes stopped flying to Cuba, mainly because it's quite a long flight. I think it's like 5 hours to fly from Montreal to Cuba. And that will require, and they cannot refuel in Cuba. That means that Canadian Airlines have decided to stop flying to Cuba, putting heavy strain on the tourism industry. Hotels have been shutting down, and Russian tourism is also pretty much being blocked off, since the Russian airlines stopped flying to Cuba as well. What's happening right now is that people in Cuba are forced to kind of go back to wood fire to generate heat, or to produce like electricity, or to produce heat, right? To cook, to heat the house, or to just use basic combustion, and that leads to severe health issues, right? So we're already seeing a big strain on the oil industry. There was a oil refinery that was caught on fire, I believe, 2 days ago. And same thing with what we could see with the combustion of firewood. it might lead to devastating and uncontrollable fires. So I'll be flying to Cuba to document how the Cuban people is resisting to the fuel embargo. There's been reports that Cuba has been expediting the construction of solar power farms with the help of China. I'm also looking to analyze and study the impacts of oil shortage. What does that look like in practice? And also, what is the people's response to the embargo, to the siege by the United States? And of course, I would like to also look into the Cuban martyrs who stood in the defense of the Venezuelan people and of President Maduro, which has led to the martyrdom of, I believe, 32 Cubans soldiers. And through my previous travels in Cuba, I became friends with Palestinian students at one of these international schools that is funded by the Cuban government, that gives free education to foreigners, specifically Palestinians, to become doctors. And I'll be talking with them about the importance of, what does Cuba mean for Palestine, and what are the similarities and differences between the embargo, the blockade on Gaza and the blockade on Cuba. But an alternative besides Cuba, I published a report a few days ago about my findings in the Epstein files. We were able to expose a man named Daniel Siad, a Kabyle, Swedish, French, probably Israeli citizen, and we were able to find deep ties between him and the intelligence services, probably of Israel, as well as his work with Canadian surveillance companies. Daniel Siad is currently being investigated. There has been multiple women who came up with allegations that Daniel Siad had sexually assaulted them. If you haven't seen our report about Daniel Siad, please do so, because there's a lot of information coming out, and we're the first media outlet to connect him to Israel, the elephant in the room, right? So why was Daniel Siad networking with heads of states or royalty in Thailand and Qatar, and working at the Mexican embassy in Stockholm? So you could look at our entire report that we did on Daniel Siad. But while investigating Daniel Siad, we found some other important documents that I think is important to talk about. This one over here, this is a message from someone who's blanked out. We don't know who it comes from. It says, Bolton only doing what Sheldon Adelson tells him to do. I got John the job, but he will not cross Sheldon. Sheldon Adelson, who is now passed away, was a big funder of Trump's re-election. His widow, Miriam Adelson, I believe was the largest donor to Trump's re-election campaign. And John Bolton was, I believe, more of a neocon, more of a war hawk than Trump. But what we're noticing now is that Trump is pretty much mimicking all of John Bolton's policies. John Bolton was heavily in favor of war with Iran. We're seeing Trump today basically bringing, I think, 2 Navy carriers to the Persian Gulf, preparing what looks like to be for war against Iran. And it basically shows, right, that Sheldon Adelson was the one calling the shots on behalf of John Bolton, and probably in the case of Trump right now as well, since we're seeing that Bolton's policies and Trump policies are pretty much super aligned as of, well, since forever, but especially now. And then there was this image over here, which is from Ehud Barak, who says, I mean, this is just like a small snippet of this exchange between Ehud Barak and Jeffrey Epstein. But basically, the context for this discussion is that I believe they were talking about investments in Israeli cybersecurity companies or Israeli surveillance companies. This is on 2013. This is in 2013, 1st of January, when Ehud Barak was still Minister of Defense. And they were like on and off on a call. And then it seems like Ehud Barak might be losing patience or something along this kind. And he says, can you call home? I think he's putting up a phone number there. Can you talk? That's like 45 minutes later. He says, can you talk? Or should we continue tomorrow? Then he signs EB, which is the way Ehud Barak signs his messages. And then he says, "Are you okay, or should I order a rescue mission to the island?" I don't have the ability to call for rescue missions, and generally it should be countries, heads of states, that are able to call for rescue missions. And in this case, this is Ehud Barak, the Minister of Defense, calling for a rescue mission. And if you're doing this, it's usually for nationals of your own country, or for operatives working on behalf of your country. And in this case, I think this is a strong evidence showing that Jeffrey Epstein is tied very closely to Ehud Barak and probably taking orders from him, or something along those lines, specifically because he's talking about a rescue mission.
One thing I just mentioned, Rami, is Barak might have been joking, half joking. Maybe he thought that this would give Epstein a chuckle, but at the end of the day, the fact that he's even joking in that manner, I think, shows the degree to which he had a very, very close relationship with Epstein. And at this point in time, was he still the defense minister of Israel? You may have already mentioned this.
Yes, I believe he was still defense minister of Israel.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, when you look at the sensitivity of this, of the relations between Jeffrey Epstein and Israelis, defense industry, it really makes you wonder where would such a joke come from, right? There's always a bit of truth in these jokes. And then here in this message between Jeffrey Epstein and Anil Ambani, I believe Anil Ambani is from the Reliance company in India. These like big heavy industries, pretty much like oligarchs of India. I think Anil Ambani is one of the son of the owner. I might be mistaken. But he says, Jeffrey Epstein tells Anil Ambani, "September, UN Assembly brings many people to my house. You should try to attend, all off the record and fun." Makes you wonder what kind of people it brings. You could assume it's probably diplomats, UN ambassadors, heads of states. And we know that there was no such thing as off the record in Epstein's properties, because they were all bugged with cameras, whether it is the island, his New Mexico compound, his apartment in Paris, his apartment in New York. And it really makes you wonder, how is Jeffrey Epstein able to bring all these people to his homes? And he in the West, in Western media, Jeffrey Epstein is portrayed as some socialite who's just connecting, who's building this honeypot scheme, or taking advantage of women. But why is Jeffrey Epstein super interested in specifically the UN Assembly in this specific case? It seems like when you read this message, it doesn't seem like this is the first UN Assembly where he brings people to his house. It looks like it's something very common that happens quite often. And then there's this screenshot as well that I had found, which this is in the context of some interrogation, some panel that is being kind of investigated by the U.S. government, and basically this is I believe with like some representative of a university or some institute, and the person in that institute seems to say that he's not able to get the woman to talk. There's a lot of question marks. I'm not quite sure exactly what I'm going to dive deeper into this specific document. But what's particularly shocking is when he says the institute scientists, definitely they'll be able to testify. The girls can be forced to testify on video. I'll explain face to face if they need encouragement. Who is Jeffrey Epstein to be able to force someone to testify? Who are the girls? And why does he need to explain face to face? Why can't they be written in emails? Right? So really makes you want to dive deeper into what kind of tactics is Jeffrey Epstein able to implement in order to extract some testimony from these girls. And then this is something that I saw on Twitter. I cannot fact check it on my own, but it's probably worth taking a look at. It's an article from The Ditch that says that Jeffrey Epstein's FedEx account was still active after his supposed death. And I believe there was some shipments taking out from Israel. So this is still adding a lot more confusion and a lot more questions about what's truly happened to Jeffrey Epstein, where he might be. There was also these pictures of Ghislaine Maxwell that doesn't seem too legitimate, whether it was actually her that was being shown on these images of her being in prison. There was some quite suspicious differences between how her eyes were shown compared to the legitimate pictures of Ghislaine Maxwell that we could recognize her from. And then there's this document that I had found. I'm not sure if you're able to read, but basically it's from Robert Trivers. And he says, "Another thing I like about you, but do not understand, we have not had a talk on this yet, is that you are polymorphic perverse. Whereas your political associates are concerned, if we take you to reflect those with you, you are a radical socialist, as you sit with Fidel Castro, who asked your friend, 'How can I be of assistance?' You are a radical Islamist, as Ahmadinejad visits you in New York after fulminating against Israel, Zionists and perhaps Jews as a category at the UN. By the way, I Googled him and he just learned that he was an engineer and teacher of poor background, something you probably knew. So did you connect on his level? I thought to myself, yes, we all like to see our money grow. Fuck ideology. On reflection, I do think I might have some way you might help with my life, whatever." And then Jeffrey Epstein responds by saying, "I'm polymorphic in all areas of thought except sexual preference. I see no permanent team affiliations that work in the long run. Surfing waves does not mean going down with the current one." He responds by nice. And well, we know that his political ideology is fully aligned with Zionism, with Israel. And that might show that this is Israel's strategy when it comes to diplomacy. It means flirting with the United States, with the Saudis, with the Qataris, with the Emiratis. Jeffrey Epstein has tried to build this network in Cuba through Daniel Siad. I don't think it worked at all. And then there were some claims. I think there was this Dimitri, I think you were the one who spoke about this, about Jeffrey Epstein's petty attempt at connecting with Putin, which didn't seem to work. So I mean, this message, I believe this is Robert Trivers, in some way acknowledging Jeffrey's fluidity, which should tie him to Mossad, but I don't think Robert was able to connect the remaining dots. Mm-hmm. Were you going to say something, Dimitri?
Yeah, we covered the claim that Epstein was an agent of the Kremlin in an interview with John Helmer a couple of days ago, and what the evidence shows is that Epstein had some clumsy interactions with oligarchs. As John pointed out, they didn't need any tax advice or any money laundering advice from Jeffrey Epstein because they had mastered those dark arts long before Epstein did. And in fact, there's no evidence at all that Epstein ever met with a senior official within the Russian government, let alone with Vladimir Putin. And all the indications are that Epstein was trying to establish connections with the Russian government at certain points, but for reasons related to Israel, because Israel wanted him to do that. You know, there was one, I watched yesterday an episode of, I think it was Breaking Points, with Sagar and Jetty was saying that he was talking about some documentation from the Epstein files, which shows that that Epstein had arranged for a deal with the head of the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, who apparently had at one point been trained by Russian intelligence. And the deal was that Epstein would get great speakers for the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, big, powerful men to come and speak at it, you know, at a time when Russia was under sanctions, if this guy would help Epstein gather some intelligence about some Russian woman who apparently was a lady of the night and who was causing problems for Epstein. And Engetti seemed to interpret this as evidence that Epstein was somehow involved with Russian intelligence. But if Epstein was an agent of the Russian government, he would have just taken orders from the Russian government. He wouldn't have demanded something in return for his services. So if the Russian government said, hey, we want you to line up some great speakers for us at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, to help us rehabilitate our reputation in the world, an agent of the government would have done what they were told. But he was saying, look, I'll help you if you do this for me. So did he have interactions with some people in the Russian elite? Yes, he did. But there's really no credible evidence that he was an agent of the Kremlin. There is a mountain of evidence that he was an agent of Israel and of the CIA. And, the reason I think it should be obvious to everybody who's listening to our conversation today, the reason why all of a sudden in the last few weeks, the corporate media in the West have been trumpeting these alleged connections between Epstein and the Russian elite is because they want to bury the story about Israel's connections to Epstein. But don't be taken in. I'm sure most audience members understand perfectly well what's going on here.
And then in this email over here between Adam Blee, who's like a Canadian businessman a bit, he says to Jeffrey Epstein, what about if you just invested in Innovative Media? This is the Raymond family. I think they're the ones who own Indigo, if I'm not mistaken. Close with Bronfman, another Montreal-based family that has a presence in New York. And Innovium used the proceeds to invest in Seed. Innovium now only owns its shares in Seed. This is how Francesca von Habsburg made her $1 million investment. This way, you and Francesca would also influence Innovium, biggest Seed shareholder. And Neil has talked about ultimately using Innovium to take Seed public on TSX. If we ever thought that made sense, this could be done very efficiently because of Francesca. There's a lot of documents in the Epstein files tying Jeffrey Epstein to bringing companies public. And I truly think that when your company's not public, there's a lot more leniency in kind of set up their entire structure for insider trading and massively profit when going public. And I think these types of emails, whenever we're talking about companies going public, I think this shows kind of the way Jeffrey Epstein made his millions of dollars. Because I don't think Mossad or Israel would be want to leave paper trails behind of how connecting them through financial ties to Epstein. So instead, Epstein's money comes from through these very shady investment schemes. And then finally, there's this document that I've showed in my Daniel Siad document, which is basically a list of like 67 names or 85 names. And basically the 88 pages are I was able to get more clarity on this document. Basically, it's a name of people the FBI was investigating. The names in red are people that we do not have a photo of. But one of the names in there that pops up is Peter Listerman, who's a Russian citizen. And Peter Listerman, his name doesn't really appear in the Epstein files. There's not many articles or documents at all that tie Jeffrey Epstein to Peter Listerman. But the FBI in another document mentioned that he was a recruiter and a matchmaker for Jeffrey Epstein. And matchmaker, when you look deeper into into Peter Listerman, the matchmaker is basically him taking Russian and Ukrainian women and connecting them to billionaires in the United States. But the question is, how was the FBI able to tie Peter Listerman to Jeffrey Epstein if I don't see anything in the documents? And that probably means that Peter Listerman is an important figure in the remaining documents that are left to investigate, or that the FBI was not able to gather information from Peter Listerman and Jeffrey Epstein, either because they were not communicating by email, maybe through Telegram, which is what is mainly used in the Russian-speaking world. But I will be looking deeply into Peter Listerman, into how he made his billions of dollars, and how was he trafficking women on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein. So this is, I believe, after Daniel Siad, I believe Peter Listerman is probably the most important to investigate. Then there's Ariane the Rothschild, Sultan Ben Sulayem, and well, of course, Ehud Barak and this Adam Blee guy. Those are the main people that I'll be investigating.
Thank you, Rami. So shall I turn to finally the notable images from my review of the Epstein Island photographs?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to share with you just a few of those photographs briefly, the ones that I think are most notable. By way of background, I have now reviewed the FBI's approximately 3,200 photographs of Epstein's New York mansion and Epstein Island. I've already done a report on the photographs of the New York mansion. And this time I'm going to focus exclusively on Epstein Island. This island is colloquially known as Epstein Island, but its real name is Little St. James. And it's situated in the U.S. Virgin Islands. It consists of about 78 acres. All of that apparently belonged to Epstein, who owned the island for more than 20 years, from 1998 to the time of his death in 2019. Now, on August 12th, 2019, 5 weeks after the FBI arrested Epstein in July of that year, FBI investigators searched Epstein Island and took about 1,700 photographs of every building on the island, as far as I can tell. And as a lawyer, I must tell you, I'm troubled by the amount of time that elapsed between the arrest of Epstein in July and the searching of these premises in August. It's about 5 weeks went by. And the reason why I'm troubled by that is because it was known around the world almost instantaneously that Epstein had been arrested by the FBI, at which point it's entirely possible that co-conspirators, friends, others who were potentially incriminated by evidence that was situated at Epstein Island would have descended upon the island for the purpose of taking that evidence away and sanitizing to the best of their ability the island. I think the appropriate investigative approach would have been to arrange to have the island searched immediately upon the arrest of Jeffrey Epstein. So to eliminate or at least minimize altogether any opportunities on the part of co-conspirators or allies of Epstein to remove incriminating evidence from the island. But for reasons that have been explained, the FBI took about 5 weeks to actually search and take photographs at the piece of property at which the worst Epstein crimes were believed to have been committed, and to which many of his wealthy patrons and associates partied over the years. So the other thing I want to note about these photographs is that there are gaps in them. Each one has sequentially numbered index number, and sometimes they jump from like 64 to 68 or 73 to 76. And there's no explanation given on the DOJ's website for why these gaps exist. So, the one possibility is that they just took down photographs in this index of photographs, which they didn't want the public to see. Why they couldn't deal with any legitimate concerns around those photographs by means of redaction is unclear. But it does appear, based upon the gaps in the sequencing, that some photographs have been removed from the database that has been published. So here are what I regard as some of the more notable photographs that I viewed in my review of the Epstein Island database. This is a photograph that was sitting on a credenza in Epstein Island. And you'll see this is Epstein on a plane. I think this is quite clearly a victim because her face has been redacted. And if you compare the size of this female's head to the size of Epstein's head, there's really no question here that this is a child. And how old, I can't say, but this is not, I think it's quite clear by the size of this female that this is not a 17-year-old or near adult. We're talking here about somebody who's much younger than that. There's another photo of this. It appears to be of the same female because it's on the plane. You can see Epstein wearing the same attire. And it's very clear from that photograph that this is a small child who couldn't be more than 11 or 12 years old. Then there's this very bizarre and troubling photograph, which they found at Epstein Island. And you'll see here that this is a sink. Maybe it's a small bathtub, I don't know. But this is, it looks to me like a sink, and they've redacted something in the sink. And they're supposed to be redacting only victims. So I just don't know what to make of this. And the one possibility that occurred to me, because who could fit into a sink? A baby. A baby could fit into a sink. But what other victim could possibly fit into that sink? I don't know. But this is very, very troubling and suggests that, at least raises the possibility that one of the victims who was photographed and whose photograph they found at Epstein Island was an infant. Now, there's some of you may have seen at Epstein Island, there was this bizarre dentistry office that certainly does look like dentistry equipment, and you can see all around the masks of men. I don't know what to make of this thing. Why was there a dentistry chair and dentistry equipment at Epstein Island? Maybe he had his own personal dentist, but why were all these bizarre facial masks on the wall? I saw a post yesterday on X about this. I don't know whether to attach any importance to this. I think this could be just sheer speculation, but somebody was postulating that the reason they asserted, they didn't postulate, they asserted, I don't know what the source of this belief is, that they were removing the teeth from children so that they couldn't bite. Now that could just be a complete wild guess by somebody, but in any event, I really don't know what to make of this this facility at Epstein Island. And then there's this photo. Unfortunately, it's a little bit blurry, which they found at Epstein Island, and this looks like Jeffrey Epstein in the press room at the White House. And they've redacted the image of somebody who appears to be, just based on the dimensions of the redaction, as tall as Jeffrey Epstein, if not a little bit taller. And one wonders if that is a senior White House official who's standing beside Epstein, not a victim, and whose face is being obscured because they don't want you to know which White House let Epstein into the White House press room. And then the cops took a photograph of this. This was amongst the wardrobe of Jeffrey Epstein at Epstein Island. As you can see, an Israeli Defense Forces sweatshirt. What I find interesting is the cops thought it was worthwhile to take a photo of this particular piece of attire. There are lots of other pieces of clothing at Epstein Island which they didn't, pull out and take a photograph of, but for some reason the cops thought that it was important that they grab a photo of this particular piece of attire. Now, I could show you plenty of photographs of the layout of Epstein Island. It's huge. There are buildings all over the place. The man seems to have had his own construction company. For example, there were numerous sort of warehouse facilities where there were pieces of large construction equipment, all kinds of bedrooms, bathhouses, gazebos all over the place. But this particular structure caught my eye. It's quite bizarre. You can see it's sitting up on an elevation overlooking the sea. It looks almost like a little temple. And when you go inside, when the FBI photographers went inside, this is what they saw. sorry, that's not the right one. This is the one. And if you can see what the hell that is, I don't know. I mean, that's not just a bookshelf. It looks almost like some sort of ceremonial thing. And up on the ceiling, someone had painted an elaborate mural, which included some young naked children. They weren't engaged in any kind of sexual activity, but they were young naked cherubs and horses and satyrs from Greek mythology, half horse, half men, who were, celebrated in ancient Greece for their virility. What this thing was used for, I have no idea. Could it have been some kind of occult ceremony? Possibly, but
there's Dan Cohen is working on a documentary about the third Solomon temple, the third temple that they were trying to rebuild on top of Al-Aqsa Mosque. And when we look at this drawing over here, it looks awfully similar to the drawings that Dan Cohen shows in his documentary.
Wow, thanks for that. I didn't know that. So moving on, the cops, the FBI, when they searched Epstein Island, they found this. For some reason, Epstein had a closet which had, I don't know, 5 or 6 or more shirts from the New York Police Department. What the hell were those doing there? I just no idea. Okay, I could kind of understand one, but why were there so many of them? Were there like retired cops or active duty cops who occasionally went down to Epstein Island to, act as private security? Your guess is as good as mine, but that is odd. And then there's this really bizarre finding as well. You can't see it here, but on the left hand, so you'll see handwriting. Apparently, this is Epstein's handwriting. And on the left side, when I saw this photo, I couldn't make sense of it. It looked like some words in a foreign language had been transliterated into English. So I did some research and I found this article. And this article reports that according to a Russian speaker who examined the page on the left, what that wording is a transliteration of the lyrics of a Russian lullaby. And I'm mispronouncing it, Bahushki Bahu, which translates as "Rockabye baby, don't lie so near the edge." And the Russian speaker, a gentleman by the name of Feldman, said that given the allegations against Epstein, the image could be of a lullaby that Epstein used to calm a frightened Russian-speaking victim. And it is known that a number of the women whom Epstein trafficked and abused appear to have been of Russian origin. And finally, there's this image. It may be a little bit hard for you to make out, but if you look at the original photograph and you enlarge it, what this is it's like a boathouse or something near the sea on Epstein Island. And what is at the bottom of this thing, this is a door that opens up. It's in the floor of this structure. And you open it up and it goes down into the sea. And you'll see on the right-hand side, the lower right-hand corner, those are metal steps to take you down to the water. So it appears that there was a way of entering the facility, Epstein Island, that would offer concealment to people who were disembarking from a boat, from a pleasure craft, and entering into the facility. Or it could also have been used to remove things from the property. For example, and I'm just speculating here, the corpses of people who died or were killed there in a way that was very discreet. Who knows? Again, we can only speculate at this stage about what this particular door was used for. So those were some of the more notable images. I just want to say in conclusion that there were dozens and dozens of photographs of victims at Epstein Island. I could spend 2 hours taking you through them. But I want you to know that I've only shown you a tiny sample of what I found. Anybody who visited that island, and this is the same conclusion I came to when I reviewed the 1,500 photographs the FBI took at the New York mansion, anybody who walked freely around that island could not have missed the fact that Jeffrey Epstein was basically flaunting his obsession for very young women and female minors all over that island. So people who went there repeatedly and who claim ignorance about what Jeffrey Epstein was up to they're basically lying, in my opinion. So that's it, folks. We have a little bit of time for Q&A, and encourage you, if you have any questions, to put them in the chat. Rami, you have anything we can begin with now? You're muted, Rami.
In one of the photos you had shared in your video documenting the house of Jeffrey Epstein, there was a picture with, I think it was Monica Lewinsky.
It was a picture of Bill Clinton wearing what is reputed to be Monica Lewinsky's dress.
But do you feel like this is like a trophy a bit, right? Like celebrating an achievement? Could it be, do you feel like there's any ties between Monica Lewinsky and Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, I can't prove that, but it wouldn't at all surprise me if Monica Lewinsky and Jeffrey Epstein were part of a Mossad orchestrated plan to blackmail Bill Clinton.
I mean, if I was to buy a house, the first thing I would put would not be a picture of Bill Clinton dressed as Monica Lewinsky, right? So it makes you wonder how
you're saying that painting might have been a trophy.
Kind of. Yeah. I mean, it would be like a way to celebrate you're taking down of Bill Clinton in some way.
Yep. Entirely possible.
So we have a question here which says, how can we help Cubans right now? Well, first of all, I'll be bringing as much medicine as I can in my luggage. So I have a 23-kilogram luggage. So I'll be buying a lot of medicine. I have a friend who's fundraising to help me buy medicine. I don't know, maybe there's a way to donate, Dimitri, for that. But
yes, there is. Sorry, Rami, to interrupt, but Progressive International is sending a flotilla, and they have asked people to donate money to their flotilla so that they can bring more humanitarian supplies to the devastated island. Is there a way we can put that into the chat?
Yes, I'll put it as a pinned comment.
Or we can put it. We'll put it in the description to the live stream in the video.
Yeah. So
yeah. So you can contribute. I think this is a great way to assist.
Yeah.
To Progressive International's flotilla.
Then there were some other questions. Oh, that's a nice one, actually. Well, what's up with your background, Dimitri? Like, there's probably a story behind your like a cabinet or whatever.
I'm in my my home right now in Montreal, my condo in Montreal, and when this building used to be, it's a very, very old building, and it used to be the headquarters of a very well-known newspaper in Montreal called Le Devoir. So my best guess, it was converted into a small number of condos a long time ago, and after Le Devoir vacated it. So my best guess is that I'm sitting where the editor-in-chief used to sit, Le Devoir. But I don't know. All I know is that this was once the headquarters of that newspaper. By the way, this was what's behind me was here originally when I bought this place. It was not, we didn't install it here.
Okay, so we have more questions. Do you think it's realistically possible for the US to ever forgive Cuba for hosting nukes without thorough regime societal change?
Well, I guess I wouldn't. I don't think that that's what's driving U.S. policy towards Cuba now. I mean, there's absolutely no indication that Cuba's seeking nukes or seeking to have the nukes of a foreign state situated on foreign on their own soil, and it has been decades since I think the Americans had that concern. So I don't think the question is whether they can forgive Cuba for that. And by the way, there's nothing to forgive. After all, Cuba did invite, they're a sovereign nation, and they were attacked in the Bay of Pigs. There were numerous attempts to overthrow their government. And so if they, as a sovereign nation, decided that in order to protect themselves, they should invite the Soviets to station some nuclear weapons there, I think that that was their right. But there's really no reason for the U.S. to suspect that that's what they plan to do now, and doesn't seem like there's no indication that any state that has nukes is interested in doing that, is interested in putting nukes on Cuban soil. This is all about the United States basically installing a puppet regime in Cuba so that they can exploit the people of the island and its resources ruthlessly, just as they once did. And I only learned yesterday for the first time that apparently there are very significant oil reserves or oil deposits in Cuba's territorial waters. Cuba's not been able to develop them because of the sanctions. So apparently one of the resources that the grubby oligarchy in the United States has its eyes on are oil deposits. But I don't think this has anything to do with nukes any more than, you know, the U.S. elite believes that Iran is developing nukes. That's all just a smokescreen.
But I also think that America, the United States, want to kill any form of movement that promotes unity, whether it was Bolivarianism in Venezuela, or kind of this Jose Marti Castroist ideology in Cuba that is calling for like for unity across the Americas, or as we saw it as well in Libya with the removal of Gaddafi, or with Iran's kind of solidarity with with their neighbors. I think the United States cannot afford to have anyone who's fighting against their division. So there are some more questions. Well, this is I mean, maybe we could just talk about Chomsky in general, but what assurance is it that Chomsky is unable to talk? He's been awfully quiet since his name came out in the as being a close confidant of Epstein.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding simply is from press reports going back many months is that he had a debilitating stroke, and you know, I have not heard, I've not seen a peep out of Chomsky ever since that happened many months ago. So I personally don't think that his silence is related to anything other than his health condition. But as many people will know, you know, his partner Valeria did put out a statement, which personally I did not derive any comfort from whatsoever about their relationship with Epstein. You know, and the thing that I find, I mean, there are two things about this story that I just cannot, in my own mind, justify. The one is that not only did he have a relationship with Epstein, which was bad enough, but he had a relationship with Ehud Barak and with Steve Bannon. And secondly, maybe even worse than that, he was advising Epstein on how to rehabilitate his reputation when there was no reason to believe that Epstein was actually rehabilitated or that he had any remorse for what he had done. So I just, you know, as I said in my conversation with Margaret Kimberly a couple of days ago, which we published on Reason to Resist yesterday, I, to this very day, value and appreciate, you know, the contribution that Chomsky made through Manufacturing Consent, which he co-authored with Edward Herman. That was a book which had a tremendous impact on me and so many others around the world. I think it was a tremendous contribution to our understanding of the Western propaganda system. But that doesn't forgive what he did later in life in his relationship with Epstein. For me, this is unforgivable.
And then you connect that to his position on Libya and Syria, makes you really wonder on which side was he really on. Then you have assuming the really incriminating material has been destroyed. Isn't this just stuff to distract the public?
What's come out?
Well, we only have 2 batches of documents, and
Yeah.
I think this represents like 20%, if not less.
Well, Yeah, I've heard a lot of speculation in that, of that kind, that this is all kind of a psyop, or they're just trying to um, deflect attention from more serious crimes. I personally don't see that. I mean, this is very, very incriminating what they've released. This is causing huge controversy throughout the West. A number of people have begun to resign. We saw, for example, that piece of human excrement, Sultan. I can't remember his full name, but the man who was the CEO and chairman of DP World, which controls ports throughout the world, this Emirati. He resigned his positions. Peter Mandelson, Lord Peter Mandelson, has been completely and utterly disgraced, apparently kicked out of the Labour Party, has resigned his position as UK ambassador to the United States. This is not full accountability by any stretch of the imagination, but heads have begun to roll. And this has done tremendous damage to so many people in the elite: Leon Black, Les Wexner, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Clinton, and on and on and on. I think what happened here is simply that public pressure built to the point where they had to disclose a lot of this information, and they're still keeping from us the worst, the most incriminating evidence. I have no doubt about that. But I think the only reason why they've disclosed what they've disclosed up until now, and I don't think they wanted to disclose it, is because there was immense pressure on them to do so.
I think the PSYOP is in the way media is portraying it. And even if we won't get the big cheese, the important documents, I think this is a great place to start investigating and then to look for other sources, right? So right now we have Peter Listerman on our list of people to investigate. There's nothing in the Epstein files at the moment. We know the FBI has tied him as a recruiter and a matchmaker. We will find information on Peter Listerman outside of the Epstein files. And I think we should also use this as a way to understand that there are probably many, many more Epsteins out there, and we need to keep our eyes open to them. Yeah.
I've seen a couple of questions about Jamal Thomas. Thank you for those questions. I have not seen an update on his health condition. In the last couple of weeks, Jamal reported a couple of months ago, that he had suffered a stroke, and he was, although he was very weakened and was now struggling with some apparently longer-term health issues, he assured his audience that he was going to continue doing his wonderful independent journalism. So hopefully we'll see Jamal Thomas back in full form relatively soon, but I don't have an update to provide to you at this time about his health.
So Cenk Uygur came up with a tweet pretty much doubting the entire narrative on 9/11, mainly because of the way the DOJ has kind of covered up for Epstein. I saw some suspicious documents in the Epstein files, between Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Daniel Siad, and their way of talking about 9/11. I'm wondering, Dimitri, how can these, because someone in the comments said there's probably someone who has access to the unredacted files. How is it possible to keep this secret so tight, right? I would assume there's probably one person with these documents who would leak them all. I would, anyways.
Well, when you look at how many people who were, it's a good question, but if you look at how many people who were some kind of access to the inside story about what happened here ended up dead, for example, Virginia Giuffre, who they said committed suicide. They said that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. Brunel, Jean-Luc Brunel, the notorious predator, committed suicide. And you consider the power of these people, I think people generally who know, who have very incriminating information that has not yet been disclosed are terrified. And these people will not only kill the potential whistleblowers, they'll kill their family members. They're capable of any monstrosity. So what we have here, I think, is a reign of terror. But I do hope that whistleblowers will eventually emerge. And, people are willing to take the risk of exposing these monsters. But I can understand why so far we haven't seen too much in the way of whistleblowing in this story.
Also, there was Harper's consulting firm that was name dropped in the Epstein files. We know that Harper is heavily invested in Israeli surveillance companies, and he sits on the board of AWC Ventures. And this is why I think we need to look deeper into AWC. We need to look deeper into the entire apparatus behind Jeffrey Epstein. Everyone mentioned there, all the businesses listed in the Epstein files. I think if we connect the dots properly, we'll be able to understand exactly how they were operating.
Yeah, just one thing I want to clarify about Harper. I saw an exchange about this recently, yesterday, I think. The name that appears in the Epstein files, the firm I believe is Harper and Associates, and apparently that firm received like $1 million contribution from Epstein for unknown reasons. And somebody pointed out that the name of Stephen Harper's firm is actually Harper Consulting Associates. So I don't know whether the firm that is documented as a recipient of an Epstein contribution, the Epstein files, is associated with Stephen Harper. Maybe. I just don't know that that's been verified yet.
But definitely worth investigating anyways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yes, so this is our new tips line, inspired by Candace Owens. We realized over time that our audience members were providing extraordinarily useful information on the various subjects that we were covering. And so after watching an episode of Candace Owens where she was talking about the murder of Charlie Kirk, I was inspired to set up an email where people who have tips, not just related to the Epstein files, by the way, that's what we're primarily concerned with right now, but any story that we may be inclined to cover. We're very focused, as you all know, on anti-imperialism and the crimes of Western governments. You can send us your tip to this email address, tipsr2r@gmail.com. Because of the sheer volume, since we set this up last week, we've already received a sizable number of emails. We'd like to, urge people who have an interest in communicating information to us to focus on, facts, evidence that has come to their attention, or maybe they've been able to link pieces of evidence together in a way that others haven't. So we're really focused on evidence underlying the crimes of the elites, the crimes of Western governments. If you send us things like, watch this video, read this article, we're probably not going to be able to do all of that just because of the sheer volume of messages we're receiving. So we're just going to ask you, if you do send us a message at tipsr2r@gmail.com, try to focus on evidentiary issues. So, for example, if you found an email in the Epstein files that doesn't seem to have gotten much attention and that you think we should be highlighting, or if you found some other document which sheds light on something that is in the Epstein files, if you've come into possession of any non-public information for any reason that would help us to establish the culpability of these people, then please feel free to email us at tipsr2r@gmail.com. Rami, before we go, anything you want to add?
No. Oh, geez, where did I go? No, I think we need to keep doing the investigation. People in the comments have been telling us that we've been more thorough in bringing people accountable than the FBI. I think that should encourage us to look deeper into this as well. There's certain websites out there that are quite interesting, like jmail.com, which is basically like a reenactment of Jeffrey Epstein's email inbox. So it could be easier to just cycle through information there. The justice.gov/Epstein website is not the most accessible, but there's definitely some tools out there that could help you investigate. So definitely worth I mean, it's a collective effort, right? There's like millions of documents. It's impossible to go through all of them on our own. So
we're doing what we can. Thanks very much, everybody. Great talking to you. And we look forward to our next live stream. Peace out.